Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome aboard once again for another sunset safari. We're coming to you live from Kenya, just 1 degree south of the equator, and we're in the Mara Triangle to be specific. You are watching Safari Live. We're next to a little wetland water system. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and on the camera we've got Manu. Is my trusty wingman for today. Now, please don't forget to join us on the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter and on the YouTube live chat. Send us your questions and your comments and get involved in the largest game drive in the world. Now, there's a couple of things that I do just want to mention. The first is that today is Worldwide Wetland Day. So we decided to come down just next to a little riverine system just for that particular day. And today we're going to concentrate a little bit on the wetlands, and we'll chat lots about that as we go along. Now, there is also something else that I want to remind you, and that is that I'm sure you all know Safari Live will be coming to you on Nat Geo Wild for a full week of primetime safaris, and that's coming up between the 4th and the 8th of February, right after some big game. I'm not sure what that is all about on the 4th, but for our US viewers, there will also be Safari Bingo, and it would be great if everybody gets involved in that. Please go to the natgeo.com/Safari Live, and you will see all the rules of how to play. Now, this afternoon, as I've said, we've started just here next to this little riverine system. There is, in fact, a hippo in there, and that was the real reason I stopped here. But he's playing a little bit hard to get, a little bit like Scuba Steve, all the way south in Djuma. And speaking of Djuma, a little bit later on we will be joined by Scott and Tristan on the vehicles, and also Stefan, who's going to be out on bushwalk. And here in Kenya I will be joined by Jamie, who's just across the river, and she's out, I'm sure, looking for our lovely spotted cats. Now, speaking of cats, I have heard through the Bush Telegraph that there is some of our very special lions here in the Mara Triangle that have shown themselves, and a very particular group of lions indeed, that being the musketeers. So I'm going to be heading out in that direction and see if we can catch up with them. That is my plan for the day. It's a very warm afternoon. It's probably around 30 degrees Celsius, and we're in sort of upper 80s, lower 90s degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a lovely hot day. If we do find those cats, I assume they might be lying down, not moving too much, but that gives us a chance to catch up with them. Now, speaking of plans, let's head you on over the river to Jamie and see what her plan is for her drive.
I hope that Ralph's prediction about flat cats proves to be true. A very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome on the Sunset Safari. My name is Jamie, and this afternoon Adrian is on camera with me. And since Ralph has already done all of the ticks that we do at the start of our drive, all that's really left for me to say is to remind you to send through your questions on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter or YouTube comments as well. So, hands up if you can guess my plan for the afternoon. It's pretty much the same as it has been for the last 4 days. 5 days? How long have we been here? 5 days. Adrian tells me it's 5 days. What day is it? Friday. Friday. We are going off in search of Malaika, the female cheetah, and her 2 boys, who have pulled a somewhat sneaky maneuver on us and gone all the way across this double river and onto the other side, quite possibly to escape this massive clan of hyenas, because everywhere you look in this area, where'd you go, that I'm in, you see a hyena and then you don't. There's a proper magic trick. There it is. Is it? Promise you I just saw a hyena. Ah! Ha ha ha! I see you. Oh yes, my car doesn't turn off straight away. And sometimes doesn't turn off at all. There we go. And down again. Of course, everywhere that Malaika has been as she's wandered around this area, she's been followed by a hyena. I have not spent one evening or one night with Malaika where she hasn't had some hyena lying about 50 meters away from her. They dog her footsteps, so to speak, because of course they are not dogs, but they dog her footsteps and wait for her to catch something so that they can steal it from her. I wonder if that's not why she's escaped that side, but she's gone waltzing straight into the territory of the Ridge Pride. Bye-bye, hyena. It was a brief but lovely hyena sighting. Let us continue on. So our plans during the course of the next few days will be pretty much to spend as much time with certain animals as possible. In my case, if things go well, it'll be Malaika, but if she goes up into the ridge, that's the end. It's the end of it. We'll have to try and find somebody else to follow all night. I'm not quite sure how we'll figure that one out, but we'll figure it out. So what I'll be doing is I'll be finding her this afternoon. We'll have another guide come in and spend the night with her, and then I'll meet him in the middle of the night or early tomorrow morning, and we'll do a switch. And so on and so forth as the days progress. Except for Sunday night, I think we're out all night. Okay, we're going to have to go through a dip over here called the double crossing. What that means is that our signal will briefly disappear. So while we navigate the raging waters of double crossing, let's go all the way across to Mara Triangle to join Steve.
Thanks, Jamie, and I see the trend has continued that she's calling me Steve. Now, the reason behind this is because I've been calling Jamie a whole host of different names, and so I'm sure she's just returning the favor. But very much like Jamie's doing on that side of the river, very much to the east of us. She's almost directly east at the moment, but probably about 40 kilometers in that direction. She's looking for Malaika and her sons, while I'm in search of those musketeer lions. I haven't seen them since I've been here, so I'm very excited that they have been spotted. In fact, we did have one day when we thought we had found them, but it was near to Hippo Pools, and they were all flying flat, so I couldn't confirm, but there were a number of males among those lions there. So the same idea applies with us here. We're going to be trying to locate those musketeers, and then we've got our relief crew that is coming in this evening and is going to be staying with them, and then we'll hand over to Taylor in the early morning, and so that she will continue the show exactly with them. So that's very exciting. I'm really hoping that we can find them. But now that we were talking about wetlands, I do want to stop just next to this little one here. Have a look. There are some warthog who are happily enjoying the very wet underfoot and nice grazing. And sorry about that, they are very skittish with vehicles around here in the Mara Triangle. But lots of little piglets there, and hopefully they do calm down with our presence and then just carry on about their wallowing in the mud. Now, let's not forget, with World Wetland Day, international importance for everybody, these are the purification systems for water around the world, and so very important for all of us to try and conserve these very particular areas. Even if you look at sewerage works and how they actually use this wetland type vegetation, and they make a whole system to purify even that kind of organic waste. And the water that is leaving those systems is almost very pure, but it does still have all the nitrogen and calcium and all the other elements that makes for very healthy water, as opposed to bottled water, which is pure H2O. That's not really really what we do want to be drinking as humans, because it doesn't give us all the elements and nutrients that we require to survive. So long term, we really need to, as humans, look at how we conserve these wetland areas, and we need to make better efforts in conserving them. Now, this is just a small little wetland area here, but it is a very important to remember that these places are very, very special indeed. And animals such as waterbuck and lechwe, sitatunga, all very much related with wetland systems, as well as all the smaller little creatures. But the waterbuck are very special indeed, and this one being the Dafasa waterbuck, very different to the one in Djuma back down in South Africa. He doesn't have that toilet seat ring on his bum, but this is a very good-looking male waterbuck indeed. The ones in Djuma do have much bigger horns than that, and they do seem to be larger in mass as well. But they're also a little bit lighter, maybe because of the warmer conditions, as opposed to us being quite high up here in the Mara National Reserve. So a lot of the animals actually more suitable for a little bit of colder climes. I was very surprised when I arrived here first in Kenya that it was actually quite moderate in terms of the climate, but all as a result of us being so high up, because just 1 degree south of the equator you would expect very tropical conditions, but it is very moderate indeed. It just doesn't really have too much change in the seasons in terms of temperature. So even in winter it's not that cold at all. Although a lot of the local Kenyans you still see driving around on their little motorbikes, well wrapped up and seemingly very cold. But those of us that know a little bit more about colder climates, anything less than 10 degrees centigrade or Celsius is very cold for these people, but for us it needs to go into the minus or freezing for us to get as cold as they do. So it makes for a lot of evergreen trees and grasses that can survive year-round. And that's probably one of the reasons why we do have the big numbers of animals here. Now, Bob, you want to know why is the waterbuck alone and not in its herd? Well, you very often find these kind of herd animals that are territorial. You find the males that are often by themselves, and they're obviously trying to establish a territory and then try to lure some of the females into that territory and keep them there. So this waterbuck, he's probably chosen this as a prime spot, and he's now going to be chasing off any of the males that come here, because this now he has dominated, and a very good patch to try and attract some females into and keep them here, because he's got all the resources and he's a very good looking chap indeed. So I say that we might be able to come back at some stage and find this exact individual still here, but maybe with a nice herd of females. Very good looking indeed. A little bit of longer hair that you would normally find on all the other antelope, but that's as a result of them spending a lot of time around water, and they do have a lot of oils that they excrete over this hair, and it does assist then in helping them maintain, because they are wet a lot, as the name would suggest. But I think we're going to move on in a little while and start heading towards where those lions were spotted. They are quite a way off, so we're just stopping every now and then for anything interesting, and I obviously wanted to stop just here next to this wetland because of the day of international importance, but we do need to continue on if we're going to find those lions before the end of the show, which is my goal. So let's head on, everyone. Let's go for it. Now, while I head on, and I think I'm going to be stopping at some of the river crossings, we'll see some hippos and crocodiles and chat a little bit more about those wetland systems. While I do that, let's head you over to Jamie on the other side of the river, and I think she's got some antelope to show you.
do have some antelope to show you. Antelope standing in the blazing sun. And I stopped here and said to Adrian, should we offer them some cokes? Which on this hot day, and the fact that Adrian has recently arrived in the Mara, I think possibly gave him the entirely wrong impression. So we've stopped with some cokes hartebeest, which is a type of antelope, but understandably gives a very different impression. I think that Adrian was quite possibly wondering why, if I had Coke to offer, I was not giving him any. Coca-Cola. Exactly, he's giving me a shrug and a very questioning look, because I think that would have been really very much appreciated. Coke's hartebeest, named after a person. A very peculiar looking antelope. We often see topi. We don't stop as often next to the Coke's hartebeest. A little bit bigger than the topi, and obviously quite a lot lighter in colour without the black pants on. That's what VM said about the Coke's hartebeest. They didn't put their pants on today. Or their trousers, I think, would probably be a better way of phrasing it. That caused me no end of confusion when I lived in the UK. Pants in South African English are trousers, just to clarify. Have you seen a cheetah by any chance? Or a wetland? A cheetah or a wetland? I mean, you're very close to a river, so that almost counts. And in fact, I know there's quite a soggy area up a little bit further. Unfortunately, our signal won't handle going into that forest, so we won't be able to go and visit it. Now, Mr. T, it very much depends upon the antelope itself. So not all antelope have territory. The Coke's hartebeest being one of them. So a territory is an interesting thing. A territory is basically, just to go back to basics, sorry Mr. T, I'm not patronizing you, a territory is an area that is defended by either a male or a female animal, and it is basically where they mark by scent and they defend it, and they do so for two reasons. One is access to resource and one is access to the ladies, and often those two are relatively linked. So something like a wildebeest will have a territory. Not here, but in South Africa. We'll be joined by that crew later. And in that sense, the territory size is interesting, because the best territories, the ones with the best resources, are the ones that are most hotly contested, and therefore tend to be smaller. So you could look at something like with that wildebeest that lives around quarantine clearings. He probably has a territory of about, I don't know, maybe 1.5 hectares, maybe 2 hectares. Please don't ask me to convert that. I know you're watching on the internet, so I can't do it in my head. Whereas something like a wildebeest on the outskirts in a not as nice territory, topies have walked through as a nice comparison, well, their territory will be larger, because it's not as what's the word I'm looking for? Contested. So the territory could be up to 5 hectares. Then you get antelope like the topi. It's a really nice size comparison there. How wonderful is that? Beautiful combination. Then you get a topi that does something known as lekking, which is basically they have a really, really, really small territory, as in a circle with a radius of a couple of meters. And they defend that fiercely, and the females all come in, and they all look in a big group, and those in the middle have the smaller territory sizes, if you could call it that, and then those on the outskirts have slightly larger territories. So it really does depend. A little steenbok or a steenbok or a duiker, one of the territorial monogamous antelope, will usually have a territory of around about maybe about 50 hectares at the most. I'm in somebody's way. Let me just move for a change, and we can talk about the Tommies, who don't have territories at all. Thank you. My goodness. That was dusty. Right. Are we talking about territories? That's what we were talking about, while I attempt to clear half of the Mara out of my sinuses and eyeballs, and possibly off the camera lens. So something like a Thompson's gazelle does not have a territory. So that's not something that they need to concern themselves with. They'll have a home range, and you usually find that herds of antelope, like Thompsons or Impala, I wouldn't call them sedentary, but they certainly have an area that they spend time in, and you can actually learn where the Impala herds are in an area. Now, it really very much depends upon the lifestyle of the antelope concerned. Alright, speaking of territories or lack thereof, let us go and rejoin Tristan, who has got an animal without a territory.
Thanks, Jamie. And yeah, the name game continues. Well, I'll be Tristan, I'll be whoever you like, but I'm sitting with elephants, and there's a lot of ear flapping because of the heat that we're feeling around at the moment. It's quite warm, and you can just see that. Look at that. Lots of flapping. That youngster obviously feeling the heat. Now, elephants love water, and it's very evident in how much time they spend around it. And they spend drinking it, they spend playing in it, they spend throwing it over themselves. And just a reminder once again, in the southern African parts, we've got a couple of wetlands of international importance, and these are laid down by UNESCO. And just off the top of my head, I can think of Isimangaliso, which is the newly named St. Lucia wetland system. That's in South Africa. Going up on the west coast, we've got Walvis Bay, which is in Namibia, another one of international importance. And then heading across over to Botswana, we've got the Okavango Delta. Obviously, that massive system with all that water basically being dropped in the middle of the Kalahari Desert, but very important indeed, and the lifeblood of the entire area. And, well, it's also brought to the fore now that Cape Town is heading for day 0, which has been estimated just in the beginning of April, which is the first major city in the world that is estimated to run out of water. So it's going to be very interesting indeed to see how people are now going to react to a waterless environment. Obviously, survival will have to kick in, and people are going to have to save their water mostly for drinking. And then all the non-essentials are going to be sort of put on the back burner. So every drop of water counts, and it's only now that it's come to the fore that people are actually paying attention. But it doesn't matter where you live in the world, you need water to survive. And it's really important that we start to look after our precious water reserves a little bit better. But back to the animals, and there's a lot of elephants here. What would a safari be without a stop with some elephants, and especially the little youngsters? But as I've said, very hot today, so it looks like those youngsters spending most of their time trying to get into the shade of the adults as they continue about their grazing. And the little youngsters maybe just feeling the heat quite a bit there. But that's a wonderful little stop. I think we are now shortly going to be heading forward. And what's Manu spotted there? It looks like it might be a hippo track. Now you can see there it's quite like flowery, the actual track itself, and if I was in South Africa in Djuma, I'd be jumping out the vehicle at this very moment showing you exactly what I mean. But they've got 4 toes, 2 on the outside, almost like the petals of a flower, and then those 2 sort of pointing straight up in the front. But that just shows that the hippos have come out from the river and they've headed into this grassland just where the elephants are grazing, and they've also probably spent the evening doing exactly that as well. And there's the Olololo escarpment in the background, and these elephants happily grazing in front of it. What a beautiful sight that is. Wonderful. Now, that's what generally happens in the heat of the day like this. We see lots of elephants. If we do find any of the predators, generally, not always, generally they are normally quite flat, just trying to cool off in the shade. So for when I normally go out in the heat of the day like this, normally stop with the elephants, and then I like to head to the river to see what the hippos and the crocodiles and any animals that have come down to the river, which happens quite a lot when it's nice and hot, see what they're up to, and then as it starts cooling down, that's when I turn my focus onto the predators. So today is going to be no different. I think that's exactly what we're going to do now. Manu, I think it's time to make our way towards the river. Let's head down there and see what the hippos are up to, because they obviously don't feel the heat as much as everybody else does. They're in the nice cold or cool water. Alright, so as I do that and I head towards the crossings, hopefully there's lots of action down there. Let's head you on over that river to Taylor, I think it is, and see what she's up to.
Touche, touche, touche. Fair enough. I'm busy driving around trying to think of a witty comeback, but I can't think of one except to say thanks very much, James. So I think we've got some Ellies over there having a mud bath. I'm just wondering if this isn't where Malika's come wandering through as well. I do want to get a bit closer to them. I just wanted to stop and show you, because I've got a horrible suspicion that by the time I get down there, they're going to have stopped what they're doing. In fact, I think they've stopped what they're doing already. Having a little wallow in not quite a wetland, but one of those random big sort of mud wallow areas that are in sort of splattered, I suppose, all over this place. There are so many random massive dips where the animals have excavated and found themselves a really suitable spa spot, digging out the mud. There we go, that elephant looks like it's having a wonderful time. I saw the vehicles here and I got a fright because I thought this might be where Malika's gone. But I think it was to watch the elephants. Which way am I going to go now without us losing signal? I think we'll be okay. I'm not really 100% certain, but I could try. Let's give it a go. Otherwise I'll go back on myself. Megs, you just let me know if it's all going funny. Yeah, just let me know if it starts to drop considerably and I'll change my plans. So when I left Malika, she was somewhere on the opposite side of the slugger. Hopefully she's still around and not in one of these forests. Cheetah don't like to hide in thick forests like this. Lucian talking about the current weather conditions and the fact that it is boiling hot. As far as I know, the only places that it snows in Kenya, and Adrian, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it would be on top of some of the larger mountain peaks. Yeah, Adrian's agreeing with me. So you don't get snow in Nairobi or... Nah. So no, it doesn't really snow except on top of the larger mountains. Similar to South Africa, where most of the snow, if it does snow, tends to fall around those mountainous areas on top of the Drakensberg. Every now and again we get snow in Johannesburg. But your next question was more, is it bad for the animals? And the answer to that is, I think they'd get a bit of a shock, yes. If it were to suddenly snow, it's not a condition that they are accustomed to, and it would probably really affect some of the more sensitive ones, particularly warthog. Warthog, especially warthog piglets, are extremely susceptible to drops in temperature, and they end up getting pneumonia very quickly. Eland as well will also respond badly to a drop like that in temperature. And where we are, it's very temperate. So we're quite a high altitude. We're at quite a high altitude. We're about 1,600 above sea level where we are. Our camp is nearly 2,000 meters above sea level. And we're close to the equator. So So no, we don't have to worry about snow, which in my limited experience is only fun for the first day, and then after that is just slippery and kind of dirty. Okay, let us jump back across the river to, oh, who was it again? I can't remember. I think it must have been James.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, well, James, you see, I'm getting called all these names that of these very good guides with a very good reputation, so I don't have a problem with that. But look at this secretary bird here. It was just a second ago looked like it was dust bathing with its wings fully stretched out, and birds will often dust bathe when it's quite hot like it is today, because it's obviously making that nice powdery sort of dust that you get in these muddy areas, which it would be muddy if it's wet, but when it dries out and it's very hot like it is today, you've got this very fine powdery dust that the birds often utilize. And secretary birds, they are large birds indeed. They also do need to keep their feathers well maintained, and dust bathing a very good example of how they do that. But you can also see how the bill is nice and open, helping to thermoregulate. It's nice and hot. So we're just seeing signs of that with all the animals and how they actually adapt and keep cool. Now, Bob, you're asking how hard is it to camouflage themselves? Well, Bob, with these particular secretary birds, they sort of walk a lot through the long grass, and so they are reasonably well hidden. But the quarry that they're after is normally lizards and snakes, so they do sort of walk through the long grass. And I think with their sort of patchy coloration, it does help in breaking up the outline of their body, but the way that they move is the most important for the quarry that they're after, because the reptiles, they're pretty much waiting for any movement that they see, and that's obviously how they hunt, but how they also try and avoid predators. And so they will be looking for the movement of the secretary bird through the long grass. And these guys step almost like they're on stilts. They take quite large steps as they're moving through that grass, and very good eyesight, so they spot those reptiles from quite far, and then they run up to it. And obviously with those stilt-like legs, they can shift pretty fast. And so they catch up with whatever they've spotted, and then they curl those toes in that are showing a little bit there, that now that they're in the open. They curl them in, and they use their talons almost like a fist, and they punch the reptiles that they've spotted. And so it's very interesting and wonderful to watch when you see them actually beating their prey to death. And then they obviously pick it up and swallow it down. Normally whole, depending on how big it is. If it's a very large snake, which it is possible for them to catch, which I've seen as well, then they might stand on it and use their raptor bill to be able to tear and rip the meat apart, and then they'll feed on it piece by piece. That's with their large prey. With the smaller stuff, they do generally swallow it down whole. Now, I'm wondering if that one on the left has got a bit of a limp, or if it's maybe got a bit of a dead leg. It did seem to be lying on the grass, on the open for quite a while. No, doesn't seem like there's much wrong. Oh, there we go. Let's just lay again. Okay, so we're going to sit here and see if this secretary bird starts dust bathing, because it would be wonderful to show you. But while we wait and see, let's head you on over to Jamie, who's got those massive animals, and I think there's a bit of a dispute.
A very lackluster, quite half-hearted dispute. In fact, I think they are really just enjoying themselves. So these are the two elephants that were having a mud bath. They are now having a very half-hearted wrestle, and pushing and shoving each other backwards every now and again. A little bit of posturing, pretending not to be interested, and then sweeping their heads round and sort of knocking each other on the forehead. All all very typical young elephant bull behavior. This is all crucial. We always talk about this, the fact that this is crucial to developing skills and practicing for when they need to fight in all seriousness. So we spoke about the fact that elephants don't have territories. Therefore, when a female comes into estrus or into heat, they may end up having to fight another male in order to be able to mate with her. In fact, they'll definitely end up having to fight with another male unless they're really lucky. Oh, we're going back into the mud now. Yes? What are we doing? First lady, this is an interesting question. So you're wondering about are you pushing the elephant or are you helping him scratch his bottom? Because at the moment, I'm not sure. I think the guy at the back is the guy in the front is taking advantage of you. Just saying. Trunk full of muddy water. Sorry, I got distracted from what's quite a serious question from a First Lady, which is whether or not African elephants can be domesticated. Can they be domesticated? Yes, they can, or at least they can be tamed. There's a big difference between domestication and tamed. Domestication takes many years, just in the same way we have domesticated dogs and cats. Taming a wild animal is an entirely different thing and actually completely 100% unnecessary. So a wild animal doesn't need to be tamed, it shouldn't be tamed, and in fact cannot really reliably be tamed. A wild animal is always a wild animal, and therefore is always a potential danger to the human beings that are around it. And at the same time, it's just grossly unfair on the animals. So yes, a lot of elephants have in the past been tamed. We always talk about, or at least let me rephrase that, we talk about how you should be aware of having a conscience when it comes to what sort of activities one attends or goes to as a tourist. Elephant riding, elephant walking with elephants, any of those sorts of things. Be very aware of how those elephants are trained. And they are trained. And it's not a pretty process. It is a very unpleasant process for them. At worst, it involves sticks with spikes on it. At absolute best, it involves depriving the elephant of a normal, natural wildlife. And that's at best. So an elephant shouldn't be tamed. Yes, it can be. People ride them. There are places where you can ride them. There are places where you can go and touch them and stroke them. But it isn't something that should be done. And elephants are highly social creatures. They belong with each other. We know this. We see the bonds that are between them. You have to wonder at the circumstances. Yes, elephants get orphaned and get rescued. You too. You're having a good time. But imagine not having the opportunity to do this. Melissa? In a play fight like this, an elephant bull obviously wouldn't they wouldn't kill each other. But yes, it does happen, very seldom, but it does happen. Elephant bulls that do fight seriously can actually kill each other. There's the famous story of the elephant in the Kruger, one of the Magnificent Seven, or the Great Seven Tuskers. I think the guy at the back's winning. What do you think? And he had a massive hole in his skull, most likely from another elephant's tusk. He was okay, he survived, but you can imagine how an injury like that could actually wind up being fatal. Are we done now? Are we done? Oh, ow. That looked like a tusk to a sensitive area. Some serious provocation happening here. Come on, I'm not done. The equivalent of boisterous young men punching each other in the shoulder, or whatever else it is that young men do in terms of their macho bravado friendships. Okay, so while our elephants continue their shoving match and their showing of strength, they've enjoyed a mud bath. Let's go across and see whether or not Ralph's secretary bird is going to, oh my goodness, enjoy a dust bath.
Thanks, Jamie. And yes, we've actually got a lot of large birds here, and all of them seem to be quite busy with feather maintenance. It seems like the position has changed between the secretary bird and this crowned crane. It looked like he was on his way over to do some dust bathing of his own. But the idea being is that they obviously do wipe oil all over their feathers from their preen gland, but they do get a lot of excess oil as a result. So on a nice hot day like this, it's a perfect opportunity to do a bit of dust bathing and then spread your wings, shake them out, and try and get rid of a bit of that excess oil. So that's exactly what these secretary birds have been doing. Now, JD, you want to know how did the secretary bird get its name? Well, JD, if you have a look at them, they are very good looking indeed. Now, it's just a little bit of a link between humans and bird life as we watch these secretary birds doing a bit of hunting. You can see that they've got sort of what would you call those type pants? It's maybe slacks, and very well groomed as they are. Nice long legs, and well, yes. So it's just a correlation between your average secretary as a human and the way that these birds look. But another very nice name is the serpentaire that the French or the Latin-based languages call these birds, which is directly correlated with what they feed on, snakes. So basically the snake hunter, that's what these birds are called in some of the different languages. And so you'll hear that in countries like Tunisia and Senegal, le serpentaire. And as they walk off, you see they've also got a very nice hairstyle with that sort of crown that they have that shows up, or crest, that very often blows up with the wind. So all of that being correlated to your very well groomed and well dressed secretary. Now, First Lady, you'd like to know if the secretary bird is related to the eagle. First Lady, I think they are, because they're also a raptor. So because they've got that, most raptors, or all raptors, have got that very sharp bill, and it's hooked at the end. So they are able to rip open meat or get pieces off. They also all do have very good eyesight, as well as long legs and very strong toes with talons or nails on the end of them. So they are from that particular group, but they have evolved slightly differently. So they are related, but not very closely related, if I can say that. But we're also sitting here with a couple of the other large birds. As I said, there's secretary birds. There was a crowned crane who has now made his way over into the wetland, and there's a couple of other large birds there as well. And there we have the spur-winged goose, which is the largest goose that we have around in all of the area. And in the background there's also a woolly-necked stork. So they're making use of this sort of a wetland type area that's leading towards the Mara River in the background there, where you see the riverine vegetation, lots of big trees. But where this crane is walking, very wet underfoot, and there would be all sorts of little insects in there as well. Okay, so everyone, I think I'm going to start up and head on as planned towards the river crossings. It's been wonderful to see these very large birds, but while we do that, let's head you on over to Jamie, who's got some spotted cats and all sorts happening there.
I I found the spotted cats. I didn't even need to move. I was sitting watching the elephants, and a buffalo chased them out right into the open. Obviously, all of the other vehicles that were here with us watching the elephants saw them too, so you will have seen some lodge vehicles driving past. So there you go. We know where Malika is. We are no longer in any rush to go anywhere. We can continue to watch our elephants while they have fun, because they are posing so beautifully for us. So they're over there. They're not going anywhere. Buffalo chased them out. Buffalo's calm. It's got the shade. So Malika's not going to vanish. So we can settle with these elephants for just a little bit longer before we go rushing off to our cheetah. What do you think, Megs? Are you happy with that? They're not going anywhere in this heat, I don't think. I'm happy. So just before I sent you across to Ralph, you would have seen one of the males mount the other male. For our new viewers, that is not because they've been learning lessons from tourists, as was implied a few weeks ago in an article about this sort of behavior between two male lions. It's a dominance display. So it's very common to see. And it is almost invariably, not all animals, but that sort of behavior is almost always a ouch, tusk to the bottom and trip in the hole. It's almost invariably a show of dominance from the male. At the same time, you do get homosexual behavior in certain species, but mostly when you see something like that in something like an elephant, it is because it's part of their play fighting routine. Wow, you have to get him over, you know. Properly pushed him down, pressing home the advantage in the water. Because it can't get out because it's slippery. See feet kicking, mud spraying everywhere. I wondered for you're not helping. Here's a clip to be taken out of context. Friendly elephant helps its friend out of the water. There you go. Can't you see it? What's it called? Clickbait. Sea animals do help each other. Nothing to do with the fight that's gone before, of course. Now the tables have turned. Now the bigger elephant's out of the water. Although careful, you're about to go back in again. Let's get a little bit closer. Helps to keep an eye on the cheetah at the same time. I've got that nervy feeling. This time of life, I'm only really comfortable if I've got actual eyes on the cheetah. Seeing vehicles around them is not sufficient. Signal. Hello. There we go. We have our answer. No, its signal is not looking okay. I shall have to go and find us a good spot. Let's go back across to Ralph, who has some topi.
Yes, thanks, Jamie. And we've got a lovely little group of topi here. And there, look at that youngster having a drink from Mom. Now, what it's doing is obviously very important for that milk to come through, because they need to do that upwards and downwards motion. It does look quite sore, but it is necessary to get that milk coming through. As you would do with cows, you do need to work the teats a little bit before that milk actually comes through. While the same with the topi, they do need to punch it almost sometimes. It does seem quite rough, but a very necessary movement or behavior that they do need to do. And you see it with most of the antelope, quite aggressive in the way that they go for the milk. But a very nice little group of topi that we've been watching here. Lots of the males going on about their territorial business, raising their heads, putting their ears back, making all sorts of funny noises, trying to get rid of the other males around, or keeping their very good-looking females within the group. And so they also make a little bit of a rutting sound, like you hear with the impala and the springbok. But the topi is a bit of it's a very funny noise. And you often see them standing with a little bit of straw sticking out the mouth. We used to have a little cartoon in South Africa called Sad Sack that always had a piece of straw sticking out the side of his mouth. And I often think of that when I see Topi with their unchewed grass in their mouth like that. He's almost like a sailor with a little piece of grass as he continues on. I think that's a female. Yes. So all of them just happily going on about their business, and we're still slowly making our way towards that, towards the river crossings. But as I say, we always have a goal or an objective in mind, and then we do slowly just stop along the way and see what else we see. Now, Jenny, you want to know if there's any dik-diks in the Mara? Yes, there is, Jenny. We've got the Kirk's dik-dik. Oh, look here. We've got a couple of males now that are having a bit of a go at each other. I just wanted to see if they come back. Here they come. And they're having a little bit of a tussle. So, yes, Jenny, we do have dik-diks here. They're the smallest of the antelope around. The Kirk's dik-dik. Very small. And we do get a couple of dik-diks in southern African areas as well. In Namibia, there's also a large number of them. In South Africa, we get the little blue duiker. And I think that's the smallest of all the antelope in Africa, followed secondly by the Sunni, and then all the dik-diks. So very interesting indeed. But they're quite difficult to spot because they're always in the very thicket-like areas or habitat. And so you do need to drive along those areas quite slowly and looking into the bushes. They're also quite territorial as well. So once you spot one, you can go back to the same area and sometimes be lucky that you see the same ones again and again. And they're normally in their monogamous pairs. So they're not a herd animal like these topi are, who would normally move in large groups, and they're also do form a big part of the migration, joining the zebra and the wildebeest. But these are obviously small groups that have remained behind and not followed the massive ensemble that has headed into Tanzania and the Serengeti, but soon to return. So I'm sure they'll welcome back all their colleagues and friends and family as the returning migrating animals come back. And there you can see very much posturing like a dominant male. Now, Jenny, you would like to know if ossicones and horns are the same material. Jenny, not really. In fact, I would have to say no, because the ossicones are actually bony outgrowths on the top of the skull, whereas oh, look at that. He's really getting into it now. Whereas horns are they're keratin based, so more like your hair or your nails, probably closer to your nails, but the same compound that makes up your hair as well. So it's condensed hair, really, that is horns. So, and they're also different to the antlers that you would find in the very northern part of Africa. There is some deer that have antlers, but in general, all the animals in Africa have horns as opposed to antlers, as that impala has a impressive pair there that was just in the top left of your screen. But yes, so the horns very different to the ossicones, where they are more nail based, whereas the ossicones being more skeletal or bony like structures. And so horns as well, they're not shed like antlers are on a yearly basis. And they have their set of horns, and if they break, well, they might still get a little bit of growth coming through as they age, but you won't have the full regrowth of horns. So these antelope do need to look after their horns a little bit better than the deer do. But speaking of horns, it seems just over on the other side of the river, I think it's in Essentia that's got an animal with another impressive set.
Again, I don't feel in any way insulted, but yes, the buffalo does have truly impressive horns, and he used those impressive horns, along with the threat of his bulk, to chase the cheetah out of that really nice shady spot that they were in. So he's gone in, and the cheetah have had to move into the sun. And it's a no-brainer. When, close to 800 kilograms, possibly even more, tells you to move, you usually move. And so the cheetah have done the sensible thing, and they have moved back out of the shade. I'm speaking very softly, not so much because we are close to the cheetah, because we're not, but because we've got a couple of other vehicles around us who are very close to us. I'm trying to let them enjoy their sighting in peace as well. Oh dear. After all that, off he goes. Trots off out of the shade, and it is the cheetahs once again. Or is he going to chase them again? They've popped their heads up. What is it with Malika and Buffalo? She seems to be a magnet for them. Sticking her head up over the top just to make sure that he doesn't come charging up over the top of the termite mound. No, it's one of the boys. And Malika's looking straight at us. Malika, could I just have a word with you? Could you please go south? Please. Pretty please. Oh, here comes a buff. Listen to the sounds. And the cheetah's gone. He's never going to catch them. They are far too wiry for him. He's coming back. Is the cheetah hissing? Well, I admire your spirit there, mister. Good try, but it's probably not your best plan. He's satisfied he's thrown his weight around. Totally unnecessary. Oh, you're going to come back again. The cheetah are absolutely not a threat to him. Standoff. Just grumpy. And of course that natural instinct to chase cats. Anna, you say that you think that buffalo are always so grumpy. Oh, to be fair, yes, you are absolutely right. They are always grumpy. But to be fair to him, anything cat-shaped in the past probably has bad memories attached to it, particularly when a pride of lions happened to be wandering about close to him. Now, I don't think he's really going to distinguish between a lion and a cheetah. A predator is a predator, and it's not worth the risk, and they're very close to him. So, I mean, let's be fair to the poor old boy. He's doing what his instinct tells him to do, but yes, you're right, they are always grumpy. I've also seen them chase all kinds of things, including antelope, out of the shade. Short-sighted, which of course is inclined to make anything slightly more tetchy, and then at the same time, they've got a fair amount of mass behind them. So an animal that has often relied just as much on fight as it has on flight. Ah, where'd you go? She wasn't sticking around. Not having any of it. Looking back at the two boys as if to say, well, okay, on your head be it. Typical teenagers. Chancing it. Or possibly just don't want to move. It's always entertaining to watch Malika when she walks with the two boys behind her. Because she walks with a purpose. And then she sits down to stop and listen. And as soon as she sits down to stop and listen, then the boys flop. As if to say, oh, thank goodness, okay, are we sleeping again? And then she gets up and they watch her for a while and they watch her for a while. And then they think, oh no, we've got to get up again. And they get up and the whole process repeats itself. Mom sits down just to stop and look and listen, and the boys go to sleep. They look like they've eaten something. With their very fashionable mohawks. Okay, I think think that buffalo's now had it. He is now going to move away. Now, Marianne, like all of the big cats, a cheetah don't nurse for very long. So again, by around about 2 months where cheetah are concerned, they are going to start eating meat, and they will be almost fully weaned, I think by around about the time they're 6-7 months old. So it's something that happens quite quickly, obviously because mum's resources are best spent hunting for the growing little ones and helping to look after them. These boys have beaten the odds. You know, we look at the two of them and we take them so for granted, but you're probably looking at about between 5 and 10% of cubs that are born ever reaching the stage that they're at. That's a crazy statistic. And there's 2 of them. We take it for granted when we see them at this stage. But cheetah cubs, or a female cheetah, has a generally heartbreaking life. Hey boys, you don't know how lucky you are. You need to give your mum a big thank you. Okay, well, our cheetah were asleep. They've been disturbed by a buffalo who wanted their shade. It seems as though across the river, Rolf's lions don't have any such concerns.
Thanks, Jamie, and look at this, everyone. Mission accomplished. It seems we've found the musketeers, and at least they're showing themselves a little bit better than the previous time I thought I found them. I was pretty sure that I did, but they were in the long grass, and we saw them in this kind of position, but obviously with the grass being so long, it was difficult to see them. Now, at least here we can see them out in the open, just lying underneath this gardenia. And there in the background, you can see how all the topi have banded together and sort of gone into a group. It's very often that even if you see this kind of behavior from a distance, you can guess that there's potentially some predators around, because impala do it, and the topi will do it, and a lot of the plains game will all band together, go in a very tight circle, and that is a good indicator that there's predators around. However, they are quite relaxed because they've obviously worked out that these predators are very much asleep. So it's lovely that we found them, but in this kind of position and with this heat that is around at the moment, I'm not going to stay with them particularly long. I will continue on and go down to all the river crossings and see what's happening down there, and we will return here a little bit later and see if they become active. And then we do have the relief crew that will come and hold the position. Now, Theodore, you'd like to know how old do I think these boys are? Theodore, as far as I know, the dominant male amongst these is Scar. Now, I think that one in the middle is perhaps him. We would need to get a nice full picture of his face to be able to see for sure, but I do think that that is potentially him. It looks like he's got a very big scar around the area of his eye, but him, I think he's in the region of 9 or 10 years old, whereas the other 2 are a little bit younger than him, potentially between 6 and 8 years old. But nonetheless, they're all in their prime, with Scar being a little bit older, heading towards the end of his prime, but still in a very good coalition with 2 other males. A fantastic group of lions this is, because if they get active a little bit later, they could potentially hunt very big prey. Now, there's a lot of buffalo around this particular area, so they wouldn't have to go far to be able to find food. And it's going to be interesting because we've got that relief crew coming in this evening. They're going to take over the watch of these 3 boys now that I've found them. And then bright and early tomorrow morning, Taylor will take over. And so hopefully that we've found them, we can also see them in action. And that's the goal. And hopefully they're nice and hungry. They don't look too fat, which is good news for us. because then, not that I'm bloodthirsty, but just to watch the behavior of them as they move in the night and go on the hunt. Now, Sarah, you'd like to know if this is a coalition that a lone male would try to join. Well, there's always that possibility, Sarah, but it would be quite difficult for an arriving individual to try and join this group, because he would be risking his life with that attempt. And if they weren't happy, which is most likely that there's a new male on the scene, he's probably going to get killed. So for my thinking, I would say that if you're an individual lone male, I would say stay away, because if these guys get an inkling that there is somebody around, they're going to probably pursue him either out of the area completely or kill him. So there's one of two options: leave or die. So very ruthless with male lions. There's no ifs and buts and maybes. It's very clear cut. And this, I'm sure that is Scar. I've seen a couple of pictures of him, and he looks like a beaut of a lion. So I'm hoping that we get to see him stand up and show us his full prowess. Who knows, we might even get lucky and we hear them roaring and proclaiming their territory a little bit later as that sun starts dipping towards the horizon. That's normally the time when they might do that before they go for a drink and then maybe go off for a hunt. There's lots of water around here as well, so they won't have to go far for a drink. They could literally stand up, walk about 10 meters, and they got their drink done, and then off they go looking for food. Well, that's the script I'm hoping for, but you know, wildlife, they do whatever they want, whenever they want, according to what happens around them. And so we should too. We adapt and we continue. But lovely to see them, lovely to catch up with them, and lovely to know where they are. And I'm sure when we return, they are going to be here. Now, everyone, I think I'm going to continue with the plan. These guys are going nowhere, and I think we'll leave them, head on down to the river, and return a little bit later. Okay? Let's do that. So everyone, like I said, heading off down towards the river, but from one big predatory cat to another. Let's head you on over to the river to Jamie with her spotted cats.
I'm just trying desperately to talk Malika out of the route that she's taking, but I think she's almost made our decision for us. She's walking further and further towards the ridge, which is a complete signal black hole. There's one of her males there on the right, slightly better view, out in the open. There. Oh, and flop, never mind. I don't know where the third one went. But I think she has made our decision for us. If she goes any further up against the ridge, well, let's see. We've still got 2 days. Let's see where she decides to go. It could be an interesting few days, though, because Miali's pulled a disappearing act. So they're wandering along this lugger, for want of a better word. And I actually said earlier, I started talking about the fact that cheetahs usually don't sleep in the forested areas. Ah, there's the other boy. And there's a very good reason for that, of course, is that the lions and the leopards like to go and hide in the shade there. And it makes for perfect ambush. It makes for a perfect sort of ambush environment. So as a result, when we've spent time with cheetah, we've very seldom seen them go and lie in a very excuse me, in a very forested area. If they do go to where there's vegetation and cover, they'll go to somewhere like this where at least they can see. They can look around them. They're less likely to be taken by surprise. And Brent and I were talking about this earlier, about the fact that whenever I've spent time with Malika, she's never, ever, ever slept anywhere else but out in the open. Usually on top of a ridge where she can see around her. And the same applies for the 5 boys. And that, I think, pretty much sums up the cheetah that I've spent time with out here. at night between Malika and the 5 boys. But between the 2 groups, they've always slept out in the open. If the boys go underneath some cover, it looks similar to this. There's no way that there could be a leopard or a lion hiding there. Makes sense, I guess. Because although they are a big predator, they are much, much smaller than a leopard or a lion, or at least most leopards. There's an antelope in the background. No, I have. Malika's taken me back to where I first saw her. That's where we're going to end up going. This is not the most fantastic view, and there's not all that much I can do about it. Buffalo's lying in the sun. Idiot. Okay, let's go round. Let me squeeze around. Deadhead Tom, this is something we've been talking about at length over the past few days, of course, because we've been spending so much time with the lovely lady Malika. So Deadhead Tom's wondering about when it comes to that sad time when the boys have to leave Malika. Will she kick them out? Will they leave instinctively? How will that whole process work? It's difficult to know for certain, actually. Hold on one moment. It's difficult to know exactly how that will work because it could be dependent on the circumstances. So generally what will happen is that the female will go into estrus. So it'll be time for her to mate again. Now her natural instinct is to start marking not marking a territory, but urine scent marking and calling in order to attract the presence of a potential mate. And in that process, the potential mate then sees the threat of the young males and will behave aggressively and sort of kick them out as a result. Am I going to block somebody's view here? I'll just go a little bit further up. I think they've put themselves all the way over there because they've got big camera lenses, which is awkward now because the best place we had was between them. This is no better. Or at least we can see all 3 of them. There we go. We'll settle for here for now. If we go, we can off-road here, and we can off-road closer to them, but it will have the unfortunate effect of blocking a whole load of people from being able to see, which would be terribly inconsiderate. So they're the 2 boys. Oh yes, okay, so males coming in to mate with a female would obviously be dominant in the area, or most likely be dominant in the area, and they wouldn't take kindly to 2 potential threats, basically. Cheetah are not above inbreeding. They will inbreed if the opportunity presents itself. So the 2 young boys will most likely be kicked away by the males coming in to mate with their mum. She will also start behaving quite aggressively towards them if they don't get the message, because she's in estrus. She's moving around, she's marking her territory, she's not really concentrating on their needs anymore. And if they still haven't got the message by the time she falls pregnant, she will then make it very clear to them that they are not welcome, because her attentions transfer to the next litter. But instincts plays a part as well, I think, in these things. I think the boys they'll feel more and more that desire, that pull to become independent. I'm sure it's ingrained instinctively, just as I think it's ingrained within young male lions. When it's time to go, it's time to go. As will happen one day, very sadly, with Hosanna, the male leopard that we know so well. Oh, it's his birthday today, by the way. It's Hosanna's birthday. He turned 2 years old. But I don't know exactly how it will be that the situation will play out. Right, well, we're going to sit patiently with our cheetah until our relief team gets here, and of course then she'll be hunting, so we're not going to leave in a hurry. Let us send you across the river to Rolf, who has left his sleeping lions. Let's go and see where he is.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, we're just heading towards these Inselberg type areas where there's lots of thickets as well. Classic habitat for the dik-diks. I just wanted to see if we could maybe find one because there was a question about them earlier. Now, this is exactly the type of habitat that you'll find them in. Nice croton thickets around the rocks. So we just go a little bit slower when we come down here. We are heading towards one of the river crossings, and where we often find a lot of hippos in a nice big pod in quite a deep pool. And there's some rapids there as well, so nice to go when it's go there when it's nice and hot like it is today. And as we go, as I've said, looking in these spots for those little dik-diks, that you've got to look very carefully just between the bushes, because they often stand like a steenbok would, very still, especially when they hear a vehicle. While Elaine, you'd like to know if we have any hyrax in the Mara. Yes, we do, Wild Elaine, especially the tree hyrax, which I was quite surprised because I had lived with some of these tree hyrax in the area near to Mapengubwe National Park in South Africa in the Northern Province, and they sort of made a bit of a squealy noise, but it seems to be exactly the same species here that makes a very bush baby type noise, where they do that almost like a crying baby. And when I came here and I heard that, I assumed it was the thick-tailed bush baby, because it's the call is almost identical. And you can Google it, you can do the tree hyrax call and do it versus the thick-tailed bush baby, and you'll see what I'm talking about and how incredibly alike those calls are. I'm just pulling up to the river here, and there we can spot some of our resident hippos. Let's see what's going on over here. Just have a look. Nice setting with those rapids in the background. Beautiful. All the little noses poking out. Everybody obviously feeling the heat as well, maybe putting their entire body under the water, and so maximizing the coolness of the river. I wish I could go and jump in there now. It's quite hot and I'm sweating quite a bit. I desperately want to go for a swim, but I'm not putting my big toe in there with these hippos and crocodiles around. I'm not sure if I'll return if I do that. So my swimming will have to wait. But always nice to see when it's nice and hot how relaxed and happy the hippos seem in the river. There's a nice big crocodile there. Wow. See how he moves up like a silent killer in the water. If you don't have your wits about you, you'll be easy prey for Mr. Flat Dog, which is what we call them locally. Very, very dangerous animals they are. But mostly, especially when you see them on the bank, if you walk down to the bank where there's a crocodile, they generally bash and race off into the water. So it's not when you can see them that they're dangerous, it's when you can't that they are. It's pretty much like sharks in the ocean as well. If you spot a shark, well, you can see him. But when you can't see them is when I get scared, when I'm trying to catch the wave of the day. And it's the same with these crocodiles. I go fishing in a lot of areas where there are crocodiles, and we do need to keep our wits about us. Even just sitting on the nose of the boat with your feet in the water as you're driving along can also be quite dangerous. And we've watched some footage of in Kruger Dam, which is one of the biggest dams in southern Africa. It's located in Zimbabwe, the old Rhodesia. in that dam, there's a lot of houseboats that people go off on to enjoy 3 or 4 days spent on the water, fishing and staying near islands and all sorts. But they've normally got a big cage at the back that you can swim in to protect you from the hippos and the crocodiles, mostly crocodiles. But this aerial footage has shown, a lot of these boats, they do put their organic waste or leftover foodstuffs, it gets dropped off into the water. And so the crocodiles follow these houseboats, and aerial footage of massive crocodiles in tow with these big houseboats. So you've got to be careful. Whenever you're putting food in any wild areas, you generally get the animals starting to realize that it's an easy meal around humans. Lovely scene here, nice and peaceful, and always with the sound of the water. It's like the sound of the ocean. It's like watching a fire. Very soothing. Now, Wild Elaine, you'd like to know if there's any African tiger fish that live in here. Wild Elaine, I know that there's the giant or Goliath tiger that they get in Lake Tanganyika, which is a little bit further, I think it's north from here. No, in fact, it's down in Tanzania. But in Lake Victoria, I'm not sure if there are any tiger. What I do know about tiger fish is that they're in all east-flowing rivers. So with the Mara River sort of almost flowing north to south, I'm not sure that they would be found in this river. It's one of those strange facts that I've picked up through the years, but I know that tiger fish are found in east-flowing rivers. So I'm not sure if there are any in the Mara River. I haven't heard that there are any. It's a question that I'd have to pose to my colleagues and the other guides and find out. But I do know that there are tilapia and catfish in their thousands, if not millions, in this river. And that's what the crocodiles sustain themselves on, especially when they are smaller. They are prodigious hunters of catfish, or barbel, as we call them locally. Clarius garipinus in particular, the sharp-toothed catfish, the most widespread catfish of all. And they can exceed weights of about 50 kilograms, which would be in the region of about 120, 130 pounds. Very large. And so they can actually look like crocodiles in size themselves if they are left to get that big. But in a river like the Mara here, it doesn't have massive pools and massive depths where you would find such big fish like that. They would be found more so in the big reservoirs of water, like Lake Tanganyika, Lake Victoria, etc. So catfish are very special, and they do sustain a lot of animals as a food source, and they're found in almost every body of water in Africa. As soon as there's a sort of reasonably sized puddle, within a short amount of time you find catfish in there. It's incredible. And I'm sure they're transferred mostly by the birds, with their eggs attaching to their legs, with a sticky gel that is around them when they're deposited by the female. So that's how they do find themselves in random bodies of water. Catfish also, when there's times of drought or dry periods, they are known also to walk on their pectoral fins, which have a very sharp spine that sticks out the side, and they will use that to walk almost like with legs as they slither along in the mud on a nice cool evening, especially if there's a bit of mist. There's a couple of Egyptian geese also coming down, possibly for a drink, a little bit of a feed on the new shoots next to the river. Mostly vegetarian they are. They do quite a bit of grazing and just feeding on the tips of the grass. They also eat a bit of seed pods and all sorts, quite similar to chickens, but they do graze a bit more than them, and less so on insects and so on. They're more a vegetable based bird. On the other side I'm hearing some... And I'm just hearing some guinea fowl alarm calling behind me. I think I might go and follow up and just see what they're calling at. But while I do that and see if there's anything there, let's head you on over to Jamie and see how those cheetah are doing.
Oh, you never know, the impala might be alarm calling at a different cheetah, one across in the triangle, so I hope Ralph finds whatever it is that's made them so jumpy. While he goes off in search of that, we are with the lovely Malaika, and she has not moved a muscle. She's resting in the shade, her boys have come and joined her, and it is a comfortable spot. And usually when I've been with her, she hasn't moved until around about 7 o'clock or so, just as the sun has gone down. She usually moves about in that dusk time. It's been interesting for me following her so consistently, and I think as we continue to do that, we'll learn more and more about her. But what's been interesting to me is watching her habits. It's difficult to know, it's difficult to draw any exact conclusions because it's been full moon, which would change her habits. Perhaps she's been in an area where there's been lots of food, lots of hyenas, so there's lots of different circumstances that could affect the way that she moves. But every time I've been with Malaika, whether it was this particular build up to the TV shows or whether it's been in the past, in December when I spent all that time with her, she seems to follow a very similar pattern. She gets up at about 6:45 or just after 7. She walks for about 2 hours. She tries to hunt for about 2 hours, and then she stops and goes to sleep. And she goes to sleep out in the open, and interestingly, this time around, she's been quite a late sleeper. What do you see, girl? You're looking at the Thompson's gazelle. You see that change in body language there, that slight upright look. It's very far away, though, the Thompson's gazelle that she spotted. And from there, the mornings that I spent with her last year, she was always an early riser, up at 6:45. And yet this time around, she hasn't stirred herself until after 8:30. Strange. I don't know what it is. Obviously we can't draw any conclusions. I'm just telling you what my observations were. Perhaps a higher concentration of lions and leopards have been harassing her in the mornings. She can't be bothered to try and hunt until they've all gone to sleep in the shade. Femke, it's lovely to hear your question. Now, Femke, funnily enough, you share the name of one of the cheetah researchers out here in the Masai Mara. Now, Femke's wondering about whether or not it's safe to drive about in an open vehicle, in a vehicle without a roof or a vehicle without sides. It is absolutely safe. So the chances of an animal running or jumping into the car are very, very slim. And obviously we drive around, we're constantly evaluating the signs of the animals. We don't take for granted because they are wild animals, but every single one of them's been raised watching safari vehicles come and go since they were tiny, and they don't see us as food, they don't see us as a threat. The only time where you might get a really serious situation is where somebody's behaved badly and upset an elephant, for example, or a buffalo, or where a cat is injured, weak, and very, very hungry. Now, those sorts of situations don't happen. It is so unusual. It's one of my favorite things to say, but it's true. We are safer here than you would be in a big city, any big city in the world. It's far less dangerous out here. That's not something that we're ever concerned about. Malaika has a bit of a reputation for jumping on cars. And that's something that's happened. It's developed as a well-meaning, I guess you could say a well-meaning or at least unthinking habit that guides let her get away with it in the past, that she was allowed to come and jump on the vehicles and use them as termite mounds. But that was not to attack people. That was to get a better view, to use them as a vantage point, just like she would use termite mounds. It's bad for her, it's bad for the humans in the park, it's not a good habit, and not a habit that should be encouraged. You'll still find pictures of her, if you search for them, of her sitting on various roofs of various cars. It's not a good habit. And it's one she's passed on to her two boys, one of whom tried to jump onto the front of our car the other night. But it's very easy to just stop them from doing it. The easiest way is to not put yourself anywhere between them and where they seem to be going. She knows. She's never tried it with us. Her two boys, on the other hand, are a bit cheeky. There's one in particular. I don't know which one because it's always in the dark. But he's pushed the boundaries a few times. Now, a cheetah is not a dangerous animal to a human being. The number of cheetah attacks are really few and far between. It is so unusual, but it still doesn't mean that it's something that should be encouraged. Okay, well, Malika's in a pretty dry area, leaving me a little bit of sort of dry of inspiration to refer to wetlands. Fortunately, Ralph is keeping up for all of us, and he's found himself a bird of a wetland area.
Thanks, Jamie, and I just want to take this opportunity to welcome all our new viewers on the different platforms. Please remember that we are coming to you live from the Mara Triangle in Kenya, and my name is Ralph Kirsten, and you're watching Safari Live, and we're now next to the Mara River, just watching this yellow-billed stork, enjoying a nice little bit of shade because it is a very hot afternoon here indeed. It's about 30 or 32 degrees Celsius, probably your upper 80 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe even lower 90s. It is rather warm. So a lot of the animals have been enjoying the banks of the river, taking up a bit of shade. We spotted the musketeer lions a little bit earlier, and they're all doing what lions do best, sleeping in the nice shade of a gardenia. But we'll catch up with them a little bit later on in the show, so please stick around because it will be nice and exciting if they do start being a bit active as the sun starts to dip towards the horizon. But this yellow-billed stork, very pretty individual he is, and just watching us as we're watching him. But also, you see how they hang their wings down a little bit? That's also one of the reasons that you can see that it's very hot. Okay, he's not really doing it anymore, but look at that lovely pink shine that we're seeing on both the feathers and on the legs. And he's standing nice and still for us, which is not often the case. They're very often wading around just in the shallows on the banks of the river with their mouth open in the water, and they scoop it around as they push their leg and their feet into the mud and try and loosen up any little arthropods or frogs or little fish. And if it touches their bill, they snap it closed in an instant. And that's how they do their hunting. So nice to see this individual on the bank, and nice to be able to see those toes and the legs in very clear there. Now, Pisces Bobby, you've commented that that's such a long beak. Yes, it is, Pisces Bobby, excuse me. And it's very important to have that long beak like that so that they can keep their eye above the water as they put that as their probe in the water. And they are probing around sort of probably about a feet deep water in general, and so they do need quite a long bill so that they can still keep their eye out the water, but at the same time have enough reach for them to be able to grab onto those little arthropods or tadpoles or fish. How lovely to see those toes, a little bit webbing. And so, speaking of birds that eat little things and arthropods and little tadpoles and frogs, I'm going to send you on down south to South Africa, and my colleague Scott has got something along those lines.
Hello everyone, isn't this cool? It's a little foam nest frog, and if any of you were on the sunrise safari this morning, you would very quickly realize that it's changed color quite drastically compared to how it was looking this morning, and that's so that it can try and avoid getting too hot by being dark. It's made itself as white as possible, thus reflecting as much light as possible, and it's an incredibly hot day, so I don't blame it for changing color. My name's Scott, and I'm teamed up with Dave on camera. What a cool start to the drive, and I'm so happy that we found this guy on the walk this morning because, like I said, it's astounding at how well and how effectively he has managed, or she has managed, I'm not too sure if it's a male or a female, has changed color. And this frog is interestingly involved in building a nest, and this nest was built at some stage last night. I know that it wasn't built the night before because there was no big foamy nest off to our right over here. We did walk past this waterhole, and whether it was a male or a female that we were looking at just now, it was involved in this foam nest construction, because even this morning when we found it, we saw a tiny little piece of foam on its back, and it means it's quite a messy affair when the foam nest frogs do their mating and build these big foamy nests, because often it's 4 or 5 males clambering on top of a female and inseminating her eggs as she deposits them into this foamy bunch. Wonderful stuff. Well, from one small wonder of the African wilds to another, all the way back up in Kenya with Ralph.
Thanks, Scott, and look what we found, everybody, just next to the Mara River, and this is a little bee-eater. It is purely an insectivorous bird, and that's why he's got that relatively long bill, so that he can keep the normally venomous or stinging insects away from their eyes as they wipe it on a branch or bash it around, and keeping it away from the vital organs that would keep it safe. So, but look at that. It's a tiny little bird, and at least here we've been able to see it nice and closely, and all those little colors. Beautiful. That is wonderful. And you can see the wind just lifting up the feathers a little bit, but nice to see it so clearly. You often don't get a chance because we actually had a different individual just before you came to us next to the Mara River here, and that one flew off and this one came in, so we were very lucky indeed to be able to actually see it for long enough. You can see how much movement they give. Their heart must be racing, and their whole sort of lifestyle is lived at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's quite similar to that of rodents or little things. Their life is really at full speed, full throttle, as there he flies off. And they often do something called hawking, where they'll fly off, catch an insect, and then come to the very same branch. But I think that one might now have flown off. But, well, that was wonderful. It's always nice to see these little bee-eaters and all sorts. Is there another one there? That sounds like a rattling cisticular. Tweet, 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 drrrt. Tweet, 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 drrrt. That's the call that we're hearing. Let's just listen and see if we can hear it. I think it's a little bit too soft. And there's a few of them calling. And so there's a little bit of wind and all sorts that's maybe mixing up the call, but a very clear tweet, 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 drrrt. Now, all the cisticulars are quite difficult to tell between each other because they all look very much the same, and we call them little brown jobs for those difficult ones, but their call is very different. So for me, the easiest way to identify between the cisticulars being the calls. Now, I think we're going to continue on along the banks of the Mara River and see if we can find anything else interesting, mostly bird-like. But while we do that, let's head you down south to South Africa once again to Tristan, who's got some big animals with water as well.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Djuma Side of Life from myself,
Tristan and Viam. We've got a elephant, as you can all see, who's just had a really good mud bath. So it has been a wonderful kind of start to our afternoon. It's hot, it's muggy, and so if I was an elephant, I'd also be wanting to get into some sort of water. As I mentioned, like I say, my name is Tristan, and on camera today I've got Viam, and we are live into interactive, so remember that you can get hold of us on #SafariLive or on the YouTube chat if you want to ask any questions. Now, our Ellie is a young Ellie bull. He's just kind of probably been kicked out fairly recently. In fact, I would have thought he probably would still be quite close to a herd. Maybe the rest of the herd is not too far away. Either way, though, this Ellie has just had the best mud bath somewhere in this general vicinity, because you can see it is wet from head to toe. And why not? If it's a hot afternoon, I would also want to be in a swimming pool now, trying to cool off. It makes sense, especially if you're a big, large animal like that and you're getting hit by the sun from every angle. It makes sense to try and find a nice place just to have a good wallow and cool everything down. The other thing that what he's doing, sorry, I'll get it out eventually, it's tongue-tied this afternoon, is he's finding himself some nice shade to work with. You can see he's kind of feeding along the shade, and what he's busy feeding on at the moment is this nutritious green grass that has grown in the last sort of 48 hours. It's incredible to me that 48 hours ago this area was looking barren, the grass was dead, it was dry, but there you can see nice green blades that have shot up in the last 2 days, and that is what he's after. So even though there are marulas around at the moment, they're still going to be providing a bulk of their diet will be this green grass that's come out over the last little bit, because even though marulas are great, they can't just constantly feed off them. They still need to get some sort of bulk in them, and grass is much easier to feed on than picking up 10,000 marulas in a day. So he's having a really good munch in the shade. You can see the ears are working, even though he's wet and probably much cooler than he was before he was wet, and he's even in shade with a bit of a breeze. It means that he still needs to flap those ears to stay cool on hot days like today. So I'd imagine this little guy is going to spend most of his time just doing this, going from shade to shade as he feeds and finds all kinds of little delicacies that have popped up in the last 20 or 48 hours, should I say. Strange though, like I say, I would expect him to be with a herd. This animal's probably only in its mid-teens, and often you'll find an animal of that size typically would generally be still with the herd. But you never know. Like I say, maybe the herd has moved on a little bit, or is still kind of coming through the thicket. It's quite a dense area that we're in, and so, you know, it might be that the rest of them are not too far off. We just haven't spotted them at this stage. I surmise that we are going to have a elephant-filled afternoon with weather like we've got today, and particularly after the rain and all the marulas that will be falling because of the rain that we had, and a bit of a breeze that's blowing. I'm pretty sure we're going to get a number of them coming out today. But look at how beautiful that blue sky is. So now, as our elephant departs the scene and starts to move on and go elsewhere, let's send you across to Mr. Vintour, who's back and is on walk with a very tall creature.
You know, it's always amazing to think about the fact that we can bring you a show from the two countries that we're doing so far apart from one another, and all just sort of in the blink of an eye. I'm Stefan Winterboer, and there is a giraffe that we're on foot with this afternoon. It is an incredibly hot afternoon here at Djuma Private Game Reserve in South Africa, and I would imagine that it's in the high 90s or just in the hundreds even today. There's a slight breeze blowing, which is making life just bearable enough to actually enjoy this bushwalk. But 97 degrees Fahrenheit at the moment, so almost 100. And you can see that that is a full-grown bull common giraffe, one of the taller of the giraffe, actually the tallest of the giraffe species and subspecies that you get, a little bit taller than the Maasai giraffe up in Kenya. And he is a prime example of a very, very big giraffe bull, but dwarfed by this tree that he was standing under. Now, he was under the tree just to get out of the sun. You know, they say it's only mad dogs and Englishmen that wander around in the middle of a hot day like this, and he got a little bit nervous with us now standing and talking as loud as what we were, and he's now moved off into the trees on the other side of this drainage line. Now, he won't go too far. He probably will just get to the shade on the other side. And while we wait to see what he's going to do, I can answer Bobby's question about whether or not giraffe will chase or have ever chased people on foot. Bobby, I've never been chased by a giraffe before. I've never heard of any of my friends or colleagues being chased by a giraffe before, but you do see them chasing jackal, you see them chasing cheetah, you see them chasing lion. And I would imagine that if you threatened the giraffe's baby, that a mother giraffe would actually chase you. So I've never threatened a giraffe's baby, and therefore I've never been chased by a giraffe. But because I've seen them chase other predators, I have no doubt that you could get yourself into trouble with a giraffe. And what they do is they stamp their front feet vigorously and quite aggressively on top of whatever is the perceived threat, and they can do some damage. I mean, to be honest with you, a giraffe foot of this size with the type of leverage that those legs have got to that massive body, I don't want to be kicked by a giraffe myself. All right, we're going to be sending you over to Scott, who's somewhere here on the
So everyone, I couldn't resist stopping and jumping out the vehicle and searching for any more foam nest frogs, and would you believe it, we actually managed to find another one. And what I've learned today is that it's definitely easier to look for them during the heat of the day, because they really do glow quite a bright white coloration. And this one I would have walked past this morning. This is the second one we found. How cool! And they really do back themselves with regards to camouflage, because even when I put my hand very close to it, it doesn't move. It just keeps, well, kind of dead still, other than its breathing, where you can see it kind of flapping that little flap below its chin there. But they're such cool creatures, and I'm astounded by the fact that they can manage to spend so much time outside of the water, just in the baking sun. So obviously highly specialized and very clever frogs, especially with their ability to change colors as it gets hotter during the day. What I would like to do, and let's actually do this, take some screenshots of it now when it's looking very white. I think this one's a better view of the other one that we saw a bit earlier. And we'll come back a little bit later and take some other screenshots, and we'll be able to compare how much they do change color as the temperature drops. Now, looking at this bush across on our left here, it's got a lot of white lichen on it, so it would be a perfect spot for one of these frogs to seek refuge, especially when they're using their kind of midday white camouflage. But I don't see any in here. Not to say there isn't one though. The other one, just so that you've got an idea, was in this bush over here. So we know of at least 2 foam nest frogs in this general area. I'm probably going to spend a few more minutes looking around to see if we can't find any more, because this is really, it's a kind of a new trick that I've learned. And just like finding chameleons after dark with the spotlight can appear very impressive to guests who are out here on their first time safari, but it's really not. It's really simple. Once you know what to look for, finding a chameleon after dark with the spotlight's fairly simple. And I think it's the same as looking for foam nest frogs during the heat of the day around little muddy wallows like this one behind us. You can actually find them with relative ease. Certainly a lot easier than spotting them in the early morning when they are not very well, when they are very well camouflaged. Very good. Maybe, though, I should hop in the vehicle and
Yes, everyone, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened on that side. The gremlins strike again, but we're all right here in the Mara. We're still sitting next to the river watching these hippos happily go about their daily business, which is mostly just enjoying themselves in the lovely cool water. So we thought we'd just enjoy with them, see how things are going, see the group dynamics. There has been a little bit of argy-bargy and some of them opening their mouths, trying to show how big and strong they are. And once again, you can see that very pink around the eye, that is your females. And when they're a little bit darker, or even all the way to black around the eye, those are your big males. There's one there that has just come up and gone back under again. Always difficult to see with the hippos. They hardly give you enough time, but that is definitely the easiest way. And there's a couple of very small little babies as well. That's wonderful. There's all sorts going on here. There, that one in top left of your screen now. A little bit further up on the left, there's a very small baby that's just gone under the water. There he comes up. There he is, next to Mom. I wonder if it's a little girl or a boy. Remember, the youngsters, obviously, like any young animals, they can't hold their breath as long as the adults. So you'll see it coming up and down a lot more regularly than the mommy. Normally, hippos can hold their breath for about between 5 and 7 minutes, but the little babies, obviously, they're normally limited to up to about 30 seconds. So they do bob up and down a little bit more regularly. But look at that. They're watching us, watching them. Seems and a little bit of calling as well. Seems to be the theme of the day. Everybody watching us, watching them. A bit of vocalizing going on now. I always say that hippos tell the best jokes of the animals. Now, Katie, you want to know, how do animals recognize another animal's alarm call? Katie, I'm assuming that you mean between species, because obviously within the same species they do quite easily recognize their own alarm calls, because they're exposed to that from when they are born. But similarly, they're also exposed to the sounds of the other animals' alarm calls from a very young age as well. And so the behavior of the adults, I would say, is imprinted upon the youngsters when they hear a particular sound and they see their parents or the rest of the adults and the group reacting in the way that they do to those particular sounds. Well, they also fall in line and do the same, and so then it is imprinted on their brain that that particular call means that you need to be careful, you need to be looking out, and you need to possibly be getting out of the area. So I think it's all learned behavior. I think the instinct to be scared is there already. Not always though, like with the little baby giraffe. I think they need to learn to be scared, because I don't think they're scared when they're born. But it is very apparent that a lot of it is learned. Now, speaking of animals and their alarm calls, well, back down in South Africa, Steph's got an animal on foot that also does give a lot of alarm calls.
We do have a nyala, and it's actually a beautiful antelope to show you on bushwalk. They're very shy, and although timid when caught in the open, when they're in their element like this riverine bushveld, this riverine thicket or forest that we have, it's not true forest, it's thicket more than anything else, they tend to be quite calm. It's almost like they understand that they have nothing to fear from us. And as Ralph was mentioning, they do like alarm calling a lot. That's mainly because nyala and bushbuck share the same habitats with leopard. Generally speaking, leopard are confined to thick bush areas, mountain slopes, forests, drainage lines and river systems, because the plains are dominated by lion and hyena and cheetah. And so Ralph's not wrong to say that the nyala and the bushbuck do call a lot at leopard, and that is because leopard, they hunt much better in environments like this than they do on the open plains. That is, however, not the case here as much as what it is the case in the Mara. Here, as you can see, the bush and the thicket extends far into and up the slopes, and we don't have the big plains that they do in East Africa. Here, in actual fact, it's one of the reasons why we don't get massive herds of animals here of any one particular species, because these bushes break up and spread out the herds and prohibit them from making large groups like the wildebeest or like the zebra or topi or Thompson's gazelle that happen in East Africa. Now there's more than one here, there's a couple, and I'm going to see if we can see them just on the front here. You can see, there you can see through the forest over there. Now that brown fur that they have, plus the stripes. Robin, I'm going to answer your question in a bit, but we've got a snake in a nest here. So just above the foam nest frog, it looks like there's a snake there. Now, excuse me while I...
Variegated bush snake.
So Jandre, who's got the camera on full zoom, can see, it's a variegated bush snake, or spotted bush snake. Good spot there, Rex. These walking crews, for those who don't know, are made up of 3 people: presenter, myself, Jandre, when he's working with me, and Rexon or Herbie, that looks after security. And we're a very small, tight-knit group, and we all help to look out for things together, and Rexon just spotted the snake. Now, that particular snake is one of the best climbing snakes in South Africa. We're going to see if we can get a little bit closer. They tend to be quite bold, which will make getting a little bit closer fine. They're not dangerous to humans. However, they do have a toxic saliva. Snakes have got a variety of ways of transferring their venom into their prey. One of them is through hollow needle-like fangs. The next is through grooved fangs. In other words, not hollow, but just the groove on one of the sides. And the next is just holding onto their prey and having saliva, a venomous saliva, dribble out of glands and onto the prey. This particular snake has the latter of that description. So it has a venomous saliva, it grabs onto the prey, it chews its prey, and the venom then dribbles out of the salivary glands. And wow, we're surrounded by birds. That's an arrow-marked babbler, and that chiming that you're hearing in the background that sounds like a stuck wheel or a rusty wheel was that of a Natal spurfowl. Now, what that snake is looking for is housed in that white foamy secretion that you see. There's a frog there. Now, that foamy secretion is made by a foam nest frog, and we have got a foam nest frog in the view. That's what you're looking there, the grey tree frog, or otherwise known as the foam nest frog. And it's white like that because of the heat of today. They go white to reflect sunlight. Wow, this is fantastic. Now, Matt, you'd like to know if the snakes are eating the foam in the nest. Matt, you're almost right. What they're doing is they're waiting for the tadpoles to hatch out of the foam, and then they're hoping to catch the tadpoles before they go into the water and go out of reach from them. So that snake is being opportunistic, waiting for tadpoles to come out of the foam, and he's hoping to snatch one as it falls and wriggles out of that foam. That foam is hard. It goes to about the consistency of a soft polystyrene or a soft foam mattress, and the tadpoles that hatch out of that secrete a substance that dissolves the foam, and the snake will be able to detect the movements and the wriggles of that. It's interesting that we've got the frog in the same picture as the snake and the nest, because that's actually the whole story of why we have the snakes are superbly formed to climb into trees and to make use of snacks like frogs and lizards that they find up in the tree branches. And that foam nest frog will absolutely need to be very wary and watch out for that snake, who can sail through the tree at an unbelievable pace. Now, at night time, as Scott was saying a little bit earlier, these frogs change color dramatically and will go from a white color to a dark grey color, even browny color with spots all over them at night time. And quite often we find them clustered around lights in our camps because they look after they're there for the insects that are drawn to the light. All right, we're going to be sending you 4 countries north, 1,600 miles or so, and to Jamie, who's sitting in the Masai Mara.
I am sitting in the Masai Mara along with Malika, who is lying in the Masai Mara. Or on the Masai Mara? No, in the Masai Mara. Let's go with that. Not much movement here, but that's okay. You've had some exciting sightings with Steph. How amazing was that? A spotted bush snake above a foam nest frog nest. Frog nest foam. Am I trying to say? Above a foam nest frog's nest. Yes, it's a lot of nest words in there. So Malika hasn't moved much, which I thought gave us the opportunity to look at her surroundings, because it really is quite beautiful where we're sitting. And it is one of those areas where there's been a sort of a blooming of the flaying flowers, and there are just hundreds of them scattered around us. I've started taking them for granted. I've never really stopped to look at them. But we can actually have, while we're sitting here, we can actually have a little bit of a closer look at any of them. Because what I saw this morning, which was really, really interesting, and it was just as Brent had found the Five Musketeers, or the Fast Five, or whatever we want to call them. And I noticed something that I'd never ever seen before, which was a troop of baboons moving through the area and eating the flowers. Plucking and eating the flowers as they moved along, and they cleared an entire area of these flaying flowers. It was really interesting. By the way, for our new viewers who want to know how you spell that, it is spelt VLEI, flay, ink flowers, not vlay, flay, flaying flowers. The baboons were eating them, which was absolutely fascinating. I would never have thought about that. So we're going to continue to sit and wait patiently with the lovely Malika, and of course the beautiful scenery with the flowers around us. Let's go and rejoin Steph with that snake in the tree.
We've decided to bring you a little bit closer to this absolutely beautiful snake. This is a variegated bush snake, or spotted bush snake as they're also called. And what is quite nice about this particular snake is that its belly is full. So it's already had a frog meal or many tadpole meals, and its tummy is full, and it was just lying probably in wait next to this foam nest frog nest to eat whatever come out of there until it was absolutely full. And just a real treat to be able to show you the snake this close up. Because of their camouflage, of course, it makes them so difficult to see. And you can see how well that snake blends into its environment. Almost totally, with that spotty front and the lines on the back going into green, and the very matte look to it. Now this snake has a matte sheen rather than a glossy sheen, mainly because the scales are keeled. Now what that means is if you put your hands together and like you're saying a prayer, and you pull your palms apart, keeping your fingertips together, that is what their scale looks like on a, not quite a microscopic level, but almost microscopic level. So the scales are pointed, and that allows for a lot more for a sharpened point to be able to push against things. And it gives the snake its remarkable climbing ability. So the keeled scales, but that of course doesn't lead to a glossy surface, a nice reflective surface, and so their skins have this matte coloration to it, and that is that for the scales, at least anyway. The eyes are a beautiful yellow color. Now snake's eyes forms, but they come in a variety of different colors, and this particular snake doesn't have camouflaged eyes like a puff adder or a rattlesnake would, and it's because this snake doesn't need to hide like that. It is a pursuit hunter, and so will pursue its prey through the undergrowth, and so it doesn't mainly, I suppose, to ward off other snakes, other males, but maybe even to attract females. Now, Francis, you wanted to know how long the snake will stay in the same bush for. At the moment, the snake thinks it's hidden. So at the moment, this snake is in a thick bush, very similar coloration to itself. To expose itself would be to draw attention to itself. So right now, it's thinking that camouflage and concealment is the best way to avoid detection and possibly even predation. You don't know what's going through their minds at the moment. And so it's not going to move from where it is right now. It will move, of course, if you get close enough to it and the fight or flight reflex takes over. Mostly snakes, though, will want to move away from you. They're not going to want to bite you. But if you had to pull on the snake's tail or make an effort to grab it in any way, they are quite bitey things. They will try and strike at you. Now, the venom is not known to be dangerous to humans at all. However, there's not much known about this venom. So it's not particularly venomous in terms of toxicity, but there's not much known about this venom, and so it's advised that, you don't get bitten by these guys, if at all possible. I know for one, I'm not going to be touching these snakes. I have a rule of thumb that I don't pick up snakes here at all. Not just a wild earth rule where we're just here to show you nature. We're not here to pick up things or to alter their behavior at all, or we try as much as we can, at least, not to alter their behavior. But just in general, I don't pick up snakes in the bush. You can see it's busy moving now, shaking its head from side to side, looking like a leaf, moving directly away from you and to me. Now, of course, me talking has no effect on this particular snake because it's deaf. All snakes are deaf, and they feel and they sense their environment through smell, sight, and touch. They don't have the sense of hearing at all. And so with me speaking like this, it doesn't make any difference to it. Now, Paula, you'd like to know how many different types of snake there are at Djuma. Ooh, Paula, you caught me here with an absolute number, and so I'd like to just ask for some help from our viewers sitting in front of resources. I want to say that there's probably about 120 to 250 species of snake and reptile in the Kruger National Park. How many are at Djuma? Probably about 40, maybe 40 to 60 species of snake. But I stand to be corrected, so that's just what my very holy memory is telling me at the moment. It's my sort of basic guide to guiding 101 that happened 17 years ago. I can't remember a fact like that, so I'd absolutely appreciate some help from everybody out there. So for one, how many reptiles and amphibians are found in the Kruger National Park? And if someone can find how many reptiles and amphibians are found in the Sabi Sands or at Skukuza, 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 that is the largest rest camp in the Kruger National Park and will have one of the most up-to-date and informative species lists.